Leon Engelbrecht, and I'm from the Saice Transport Division, as a few of you would know. So this is our first online event, and it's the first time that we are going to start this debate series that we want to roll out. It's the first of our events we've arranged. And it looks from what the overwhelming responses we've had that this is an incredibly relevant topic. So we've completely nailed an issue that's very relevant to everybody in the industry. And we're grateful that Saice can at least help, the transport division can help our members in this way. So when this lockdown started and we didn't even know the word level 5 and level 4. We thought it was going to be 3 weeks. It went on to another 2 weeks. Then we got level 5, level 4. Now we're on level 3. And the reality is that this is an uncertain time that's lying ahead of us. And we obviously cannot put our whole industry on hold until we know what's going to happen. There is a new normal, and we totally have to just deal with the new normal. And that's what today is about. It's about asking our local authorities how they think, because this is new for all of us, how they think we would evaluate transport assessments, what are all the assumptions we can make when it comes to data, and make sure that we don't actually stop what we're doing and we can carry on. So it's this whole conundrum of data. How do we handle it? Now, today we are joined by 3 presenters, and thank you for those presenters who generously offer their time to us. Firstly, it's going to be Esther Schmidt from the Johannesburg Roads Agency, then Rivash Duki from eThekwini Transport Authority, and Lee Stolworthy from City of Cape Town. We also have a few other panelists. It's a bonus that you probably didn't even know about, who's going to also answer some of the questions during the question and answer session. And the names you can see on the right there. Our program is quite tight. We have only an hour and a half. So we're going to take the first, from now until 3:30, we're going to have brief presentations by the 3 presenters. And that's then going to follow by an open interactive debate or question and answer session that will also be responded to by some of the other panelists such as Jose, Nuran, Alan, Avi, and Robin. And then we will go into further questions and answers. We'll watch the questions that come through, but also bear in mind we have asked you questions. So we're going to try and answer those questions through the presentations. But if there are more questions in the chat, we will try our best to answer as many as we can. And then in the end, we will have a wrap up by myself, and Frederick Slabbert is also just going to do a thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Esther Schmidt, and I just want to introduce Esther. Esther has over 20 years experience in the transportation and traffic engineering environment. She's currently operations manager, traffic engineering services at the JRA, where she's responsible for the planning and design of the traffic signal network, evaluation of traffic impact studies, as well as policies and standards, and very relevant to today's talk, Esther's experience, and she's going to share that with us now. So over to you, Esther.
Hi, good afternoon. How many? All 329 participants from a very warm Joburg. Welcome to everyone. I think before I start, I just need to do 1 or 2 disclaimers about the presentation. At this point in time, it's really just thoughts and ideas and a possible direction of how the City of Johannesburg is considering proceeding in this very uncertain times. I mean, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't have anybody we can really look towards to say, you know, to give us firm direction. And I would ask you, if you do take notes, take it in pencil. Might just change in a couple of days' time. But we all realize that we have to continue. And so this is a very basic presentation of where we're currently standing, where we're thinking of going, and how we're thinking of tackling the issues that we're facing. So I think firstly is, at this point in time, we are of the opinion that any data collection that has taken place since the start of the lockdown doesn't yield any usable estimates that we can use. And I'll show you now why we feel like, why we say that. Secondly, we do anticipate that there will be some permanent behavioral changes that's going to take place. Some of these changes is interim and it has changed since level 5, 4, and 3, but we do believe that some individuals, companies will start doing permanent changes in terms of when they work, how they travel. We also feel that given the economic impact of this pandemic, that we are facing a recession, and we're all aware of that. The recession might not have an impact in 20 years from now. So if you're doing modeling in a development that has a 10 to 20 year forecast, it might not have that big an impact. But yeah, we believe it will definitely impact and affect travel in the 0 to 5 year time frame. But as I said, we think progress is necessary, and we need to come up with some credible method or procedure that will allow us to achieve this objective of moving forward. We do have some data of what happened in Joburg. For those that are not familiar with our lovely city, this is Gauteng. So this was just 3 days after level 5 started. Level 5, basically, we've noted across the city that Sandton had up to 90% reduction in traffic, basically no traffic, and across the rest of Gauteng, up to 80-90% of reduction in vehicle traffic on our roads. And then you obviously get to about 70 to 80 on the outskirts. So the majority of people were very compliant and all adhered to the stay at home. Then when we got to level 4, now what you're seeing here is data from the TomTom, and this is for the last 7 days, and it particularly focuses on the 28th of May, which was during the last legs of level 4. Everybody's waiting for the macro to open on the Monday. So this is a Thursday morning, and as you know, what TomTom does is it compares your travel time during congestion versus your travel time when it's uncongested conditions, and the percentage is an increase in your travel time. So what we found in the blue line is what you would normally expect last year this time to 2019, similar conditions. And then your red solid lines and your red dotted lines is the live congestion is the solid, and the previous week's congestion is the dotted. And there's about a 58% decrease in congestion levels right now compared to what there was last year. And we saw a similar trend under level 3, although a lot of more businesses is opened under level 3. We can see for this week, Tuesday, in the morning, there was a 57% change from last year compared to this year in terms of the amount of congestion that's experienced on our road network. And this is one of the reasons why we believe that doing counts currently, it's not going to yield a good indication of normal traffic conditions, what you would normally expect on in Johannesburg roads. How do we go forward? I think, and I have to thank Alan, I'm not sure if Alan's aware of this, but on their website, on Sunwell's website, there is you can get some indication of annual growth patterns. And for the 2019 calendar year, Sunwell experienced a 1% increase in traffic volumes above the GDP. And we can see the GDP was in the order last year of about 1.6, up to about, unfortunately, this year it's 0.5. We do believe that we require some further research in terms of looking at traffic growth and compare that to GDP patterns. Looking at that, I'm going to try and answer some of the questions Madeleine gave me. And that's why I say this is a very simple presentation. There's no funny technical stuff. I'm just going to try and answer some of the questions you might be sitting at home wondering about how Joburg is going forward. Can you use historic data? Yes, we will accept historic data. Ideally, we wouldn't like data to be older than 2 years. We've got areas in Johannesburg where we've got rapid growth in terms of developments, and some of those areas look significantly different from what they looked even 6 months ago. But we do also have areas that is very stabilized, and you can still rely on historic data. If you want to use data that is outside that, which is up to 5 years, we would just advise you to come and discuss with us upfront before doing any analysis. When do I think, or when do Joburg think that the counts will be representative again? As I said, we are monitoring the condition on a daily basis, and only thing we can do right now is use that information as a tool to guess. I can't tell you if it's going to be July, August, September. What I can tell you, it is something that we are continuously monitoring, and when we do feel, given the data that we receive, that we're at a point where the traffic resembles similar conditions to what it resembled last year, we will advise the industry from our side that our traffic counting activities has resumed, and therefore we would accept any new counts coming in as well. A realistic traffic growth rate, that is like looking into the crystal ball. So we've kind of taken the 1% above GDP as an indicator, and we've said, you know, we would accept a 2.5% growth in background traffic. But obviously, again, you know, we would want you to engage with us, and you can discuss individual case-by-case situations with the authority. The value of doing counts now, as we believe there is no value in it, unless you would like to measure the impact of COVID on traffic, then you're more than welcome to count. But from a development point of view, we don't see the value right now. Therefore, we preferably would rely on historic counts with adjustments. Will we accept any data sources? We will accept any data source that is based on sound engineering. If it can yield justifiable results and it is based on sound judgment, we would accept it. Should TIAs be delayed when no data is available? We don't believe that we can afford to delay, number one, the economy, or delay any development from taking place. So what we would say is that we would look at a kind of a phased approach in terms of how to deal with this TIA, so that when traffic do normalize, and hopefully, you know, the development has been able to proceed with their township application, has been able to do the administrative portion, that we would have a second chance or second stab at the TIA, where we can then accept possibly an updated TIA, where we can then look at more accounts that is probably more available at that time. But we don't want to delay the actual town planning process. Therefore, for us, we would say, let's look at a phased approach with a provision where we can do an updated TIA post-lockdown situations. So while the current situation is unprecedented, and I think none of us really have got the definite answers, we would just want the industry that when you engage with us, as long as you come up with a sound engineering judgment, we are willing to listen and willing to accept opinions and suggestions from the industry. When you engage with us, what we would like to see is that you come to us with your project, what is the context of your project, what is the data needs of your projects. We can then develop jointly with the applicant kind of a scope of work, you know, reach consensus in terms of the analysis, the periods of analysis, what counts will be acceptable, etc. We can then help you identify any available data resources, whether that is from established traffic counting companies, whether it's from our own database, or whether it's from previous studies that we have available at the GRA. And then lastly is then to develop estimates based on historic trends, based on, we can help you with changes in land use over the years, and we can then come up with an adjustment factor to the historic counts. How do non-normal patterns affect the requirements for the approval? We just want professionals to discuss the scope of work with us prior, although it was always a kind of you could do it, but sometimes, you know, not everybody did come and discuss it with us. During this pandemic period, we would like you to make a point of coming to discuss with us before you do any analysis or work on your studies. We don't anticipate any changes to the TIA requirements at this stage, but as I say, write that in pencil. Same with the public transport plans, although it's not our area of jurisdiction. We would want you to engage with the COJ transportation if you would like to change anything that was prior acceptable under public transport plans. For TIAs that promote active travel and public transport, I think as long as we can balance the ideal with the realistic and adopt a phased approach, so that you don't have a situation where you are relying on a residential portion of your development to support your educational rights, but you built the school first and only 10 years later your residential units are occupied. We would just want to see a balanced approach so that it can achieve the OD patterns that you envisage in your TIA for active travel, walking and cycling. Road closure studies, we would, for renewals, it's acceptable to just to give us a brief description of what's happening currently at your road closure. But if you want to do a new study where there's no closure in place, we would like you to first discuss with us. I'm nearly done. I'm hoping I'm not going over. We also do understand that we think that by estimating from historical trends, we are more likely going to overestimate than possibly underestimate demand at this point in time. So if possible and where desirable, if we can look at in your TIA as a post-pandemic collection and assessment component, where we have opportunity to relook at the TIA, relook at findings, and possibly make adjustment to your recommendations, which could be in favor of the applicant. Post-lockdown, I think all of us would like to see more research in understanding the relationship between traffic and indicators such as the DGP, such as home-based educational trips, so that should similar events occur, we've got a better historical background to rely on. A guideline on estimating traffic volumes and adjustments under different situations would be desirable, but I think most importantly is just collaborating between ourselves in order for us all to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther. You were doing a fantastic job to answer a lot of the questions. So hopefully we can cut out some of the questions that are going to be coming through. I just want to, for everybody's benefit, say that questions, there's not going to be a live interaction with the participants. We will actually be only following questions that are coming through on the chat. So there's not, we just have too many participants, and it's not the way this was set up. So our next presenter is Rivash Duki. He is the chief engineer from eThekwini Municipality and is responsible for preparing technical standards for traffic engineering and for traffic simulation. He is the person at ETA who does the assessments of the traffic impact studies. He was also the first person in South Africa to get a professional traffic operations engineer qualification, and sometimes he has also presented traffic engineering courses at the South African Rail Federation. So I'd like to hand over now to Rivash to talk us through eThekwini's proposals.
Hello all, and obviously thank you for this opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us in the civil engineering industry and the transport industry to actually come together and share our ideas in this most difficult time that we find, and also strange and a very interesting time as well. So what I'll do fairly quickly, because of the short time constraints that we have, I'd like to take you through the eThekwini Transport Authority approach to how we prepare, accept applications, and review traffic impact assessments during and post the COVID-19 lockdown. I just like to state that eThekwini Transport Authority had to respond fairly quickly, in the sense that we were receiving applications. We actually commenced with work on the 1st of May. And we had to brainstorm a sort of method on how we accept and receive applications. Very quickly as well, we have also moved to an online application submission. And we are accepting only online applications for your SPLUMA applications, for your traffic impact assessments and the like, and also your building plan applications. So what I would do, I'm trying to go into full screen mode very quickly. Can you all see my screen? Zoom is new to me. Okay. So yes, so I will take you through a brief agenda. We'll do the introduction. And I think what is very important that we must cover is what are the current TIA constraints pre-COVID-19 pandemic. Noting that if we have current constraints, when we add this additional constraint, how worse does it actually make it? I think we've given very little time to actually understand what are the current constraints. So I'd like to briefly touch on some of the current TIA constraints we have. I'll briefly go through ETA's approach. ETA's approach is actually published on the ETA website. That's for all developers, applicants, the public, etc., when they are going to submit the TIAs. Noting we started to receive a steady stream of the SPLUMA applications under level 4. We have received some, and we're starting to receive a steady stream under level 3. I'll discuss some of the pros and cons, and by no means ETA's approach is a sort of static approach. It will change. It's a very dynamic approach. And obviously, I want to present some of the statistics, both internationally and also here within eThekwini itself. And I'll just like to wrap up with the lessons learned and actually gearing up to the new normal traffic demand, the traffic trend, etc. So I'll just actually go into the current constraints. In fact, I state that in general, what is the certainties of like TIAs that we have without the COVID-19 in place? We go and we actually consider that a TIA is generally prepared with a single snapshot base data, and yet we design transport facilities to be in place for at least 5 to 10 years. We base it on a sort of trip demand that is surveyed by national, with little consideration to what we do within our own city. We don't have an extensive data source for that. It's based on a traffic distribution and a sort of traffic assignment assumptions. And it's obviously based on limited local traffic operational, parameters. More often people are using the default parameters when they run their software, etc. Very little emphasis is placed on actually collecting relevant data for your city. So I think what we need to do is that then we find out that the most important aspect of a TIA is that a reliable TIA is based on reliable data. And what is your reliable data? That refers to good records. It's equally both your previous records, historic records, and also more equally important, up-to-date current records. Very few cities have good up-to-date current records. Very few cities have good sort of previous records as well. And when we talk about the data, it's not only your sort of traffic counts, it's your socio-economic data, demographic data, traffic operational data for your traffic models, like your saturation flow, gap acceptance, etc. Many of us tend to rely on the sort of default parameters that come with the software actually associated. If you have good data, it actually allows you to predict and actually forecast very well. And a TIA is actually a forecast tool for the future, and it actually lays down what road infrastructure, transport infrastructure you need for the future that should be in place to support what are your development needs, as an example. This is a very quick slide. I just want to take 2 minutes on it. This actually explains the sort of constraints that we have, assumptions that go into a TIA, various assumptions, and at the end we get one sort of recommendation. When I say one, it could be several intersection upgrades, road upgrades, and the like. What is the impact of different traffic counts? What is the impact of different trip generation rates? What is the impact of different traffic assignment and sort of trip distribution? So we ran a scenario. If you do 2 different background traffic growths, you do 3 different trip generation rates, you do 2 different traffic assignment, for example, your trip generation high, medium, low, and you could end up with 12. We could end up with 12 different scenarios just for one site, junction as an example. We then ran a simulation as an example, not a simulation, actual work that we did. If you go with 2 different growth rate trends, 2% versus 5% versus your trip factors, PT, NMT, you could end up with 3 different trip generation rate scenarios. And for the same junction, you could end up with 12 different results. So I'm saying currently we got constraints. When we add the COVID-19, it is obviously going to expand that. And I think we put little focus on actually addressing our sort of current constraints. This is just something for us to actually take away from this. So just very briefly, what have we done now at the ETA? As I said, we've been receiving traffic impact assessments prepared under the level 4, and we received a steady stream of applications under level 3. We had to respond fairly quickly. We increased our sort of traffic impact assessment threshold. Etiquette had a very low threshold that was from 11 trips to 50 trips. And we actually proposed a method for the base traffic surveys to be used when you do a traffic impact assessment. And then we classified our sort of traffic impact assessments into low sort of impact development, and then your high impact. Low impact being less than 1,000 trips, and your high impact being more than 1,000 trips. So what we've done, if you just want to know quickly our sort of low threshold, how it came about, we had about 8,000 roads in the city. And basically, when we say no traffic impact assessment, we are basically given any sort of developer free trips. He does not have to do anything except for his access, etc. And when we looked, we had about 8,000 roads, and we roughly came up with 10 developments per road, would end up with 880,000 peak hour trips versus the current threshold that the DOT have, and also your sort of COTO manual. If you work with 50 trips and the number of roads that anyone could now take up this rights for a change in land use, you could end up with 4 million peak hour trips. So that's one of the reasons eThekwini has actually managed to keep traffic congestion to a reasonable, manageable state. However, and also maintain a reasonable sort of economic growth. So first thing, we moved our threshold up to 50, and now we will take the risk for that. Bearing in mind, we will have a slump in the growth of your sort of economy and your trends. So yes, we can now take that risk. And then we've also adjusted the sort of public transport plans. We're stating that we do not require a sort of public transport plan when you have less than 100 peak hour passenger trips. And I'm not from the public transport department, but this was done in sort of consultation. I was part of that meeting when we arrived at that. I have one of my actual colleagues that's sitting on the Saice panel today that could also assist with that. But in all, it's about the risk. It's about the number of trips, and we feel that 100 peak hour passengers is something we can come up with a plan that you should not be lumped on a sort of developer, as an example, as to why we set it at like 100. If we go more than 100, 200, 300, then the plans become quite difficult given our current constraints, resources, etc., to actually develop these plans. So then again, what we're saying under your level 3 and your level 4, we are actually considering a trip expansion factor. And this is you only do your traffic counts for the intersections that we do not have. Ideally, we will have traffic counts for most of the junctions in the city. ETA has an extensive traffic count program. And also we have more than 800 to 1,000 signals in the city that have loop detectors on them. So we have traffic counts available for all that. So we believe we have enough control counts pre the COVID-19 to actually understand what were the traffic trends, and also more sort of importantly, what were the turn-in volumes. As you know, when you go to a TIA, you go down to the detail of a turn-in volume at a sort of junction, because at like some instance, you need to assess the turn movements, upgrading of turn movements. So you need to go down to turn volumes as like opposed to links. Then we rely on your sort of bigger developments to use our sort of up-to-date ME model that we have for the city. We've gone down to in most instances level class 4 roads. So we've got a comprehensive road network in the city, and that was updated with the 2018 data. We updated that with some travel surveys, household travel surveys in 2018. So it's quite up to date that we could assist. So in all, what we're saying is that the pros and cons, ETA's approach is a fairly quick and easy approach. We have good data records in the ETA. We have permanent count stations in the ETA, and we also got a very good ME model. And also ETA has a very good pre-SPLUMA application process, and we got something called the catalytic project offices. We're all sort of high-profile projects, and generally any project in the city, we, for example, already get wind of this project. We know the type, we know the location, we know the intended development yield. So when we developed our approach for the traffic expansion factors to be applied, we already had a sense. We had about 5 applications that were in the region of like 2,000 trips, and the rest were anywhere between 50 to about 500 trips. So as I say, our approach is not a sort of a static approach. It will change. One of the cons is that existing counts are skewed and is not simply a downscale version of the pre-lockdown. And this will be verified. We have now done the verification for that. We say one of the cons is as well that the existing traffic count profile, example, peak periods are not simply a downscale version of the sort of pre-lockdown. Those are some of the cons that we thought about when we actually decided on this. And we said in some areas, due to our regeneration programs in our rural areas, in our township areas, our sort of data records in those areas are not too good. But fortunately, we don't have many projects as yet in those areas. I just want to go to the stats to date. Internationally, under level 5, the top 10 cities experience anywhere from a 70% to 85% reduction in trips. And what we've done, just as an indication, Milan, Italy, before the lockdown, the rate shows you the amount of travel versus after the immediate level 5 lockdown shows you very little travel on the road network. Similarly, Los Angeles in the USA, the rate showing the amount of travel versus less travel before and after. And then just some stats, and then we started to pick up some stats from abroad. And what we noticed that the actual traffic profiles are basically a similar shape. The peaks are more or less where it should be under pre and post. So there is a trend. So we kept that in mind, and then we started to look very sort of intensively at the sort of ETA stats. And then we found out that yes, that the traffic counts are in the main a downscale version of the pre-pandemic. So these are actual stats. These are actual volume counts that we've got about 800 sites. So I just pulled in some of them. The trends, okay, there's a peak roughly where it should be. There's something, it seems to follow a trend, 40% reduction on this side, 33% reduction. The next graph, the level 4 versus pre-lockdown, we got the dates on all of these things. Okay, there is a similar trend. So on your link volumes, for sure, there is a downscale version on it. It's obviously area dependent as well. Residential areas versus your commercial hubs, town center areas, but we've got the data for that. So we think we've got enough information. There's another set of slides showing 45% reduction, 42% reduction. But I think some of the main takeaways is that the trend lines between the pre and the post pandemic is more or less a similar shape. So it is tending towards a downscale version, as what we found here in eThekwini. Just another slide as well. So the shapes are more or less there. We're expecting some peaks. There's the midday peak in this area that's dropped. We've got a peak trend, we've got a peak trend, we've got a peak trend. So it is tending to be a downscaled version. I've not put up all the stats, but just to give you a sort of indication. Lastly, I would also like to end is that the sort of lessons we learned and the way forward. As I said, this is not a sort of static approach. This approach will change it will change as and when needed. But I think that we've got a comprehensive data sources. We lack comprehensive data sources in SA. And we need to move, SA cities need to move to real-time data collection, and to start with a dedicated traffic data collection process moving towards your real-time data. ETA has been attending for the last 3 years to actually, because your data or your traffic is actually manages the pulse of your city, and actually your traffic is the pulse, and that's the sort of heartbeat of your city. And we want to move towards a real-time traffic program. We've started to look at Google, Indrix, and also TomTom. Of our research so far and our sort of engagements, Indrix seems to be one of the best. Monitoring, giving you OD matrices, hotspot location, bottlenecks, stats, V overseas, etc. And I'm not saying Google and, for example, TomTom can't do that, but they seem to actually progress in that field. And our intention within the next year is to move to a real-time traffic monitoring system in the city. The major benefit of this sort of approach that we have is that we can now process a development application and also kickstart the growth. Our sort of technical approach is not it is not a static approach. In the background, we are working on a program for an intensive data collection, and also very sort of importantly, we want to measure the sort of economic impact trends, because this is what is used in our forecast model. So we've actually started that process as well, and we're looking to update trip generation rates. All of these things are actually done very cautiously because trends change. So we don't want to be locked into a corner as well. But just to note, one of the most important things, we have already started our sort of economic assessment, and we started to look at updated trip generation rates. This is something that's been on our table for a long time. It was to update the sort of Koto manual as well. We started with a sort of intensive program as well. Again, our sort of current approach. Yes.
You need to speed up a bit.
Yes.
You've used Lee's time as well.
Sure, that's fine. So again, our current approach is that we actually still comply with NLTA, we comply with the SPLUMA, we do not believe in stalling the development application process to find a perfect solution. We believe that we can catch up given the lead time between your development application process till they actually break ground. And we believe we can review and actually amend, or sort of ultimately, we can make good if there's any shortfalls from a city's point of view. Yes, and that's my presentation for this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravash. Sorry that I had to push you at the end,
That's
but we have such a limited time.
Thank
and
you.
I'd like to also thanks for that. And I thought your slide with all the variables and parameters was very useful, because the questions were really related a lot around those. I'm going to introduce you now to our next speaker, and he is Lee Stolworthy from the City of Cape Town. He's the Transport Forward Planning Manager in the Transport Director at the city. He joined the city originally in 2012 to work exclusively on the BRT system, but with the establishment of the former Transport for Cape Town, his role evolved towards planning and integration of all transport systems and land use. And amongst others, many others, his current focus is on the development of a congestion management plan. But let me please, can I hand over to Lee? Over to you. Thanks, Lee. I don't know if you're on mute, Lee. We can't hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Can you see the presentation?
We can.
Okay, so I think what you're going to notice now is that when you ask three people the same question, you get three distinctly different answers. So my presentation is quite different to the first two. And I think I just want to start off by saying, out with the old and in with the new. What's changing? I think that's the burning question that everybody has is how is the world going to be different? And there's a lot of discussion that's been happening within the city lately and outside about what impact does this COVID and the lockdown have on everything, not just the transport sector. And there's a multitude of things. But I think just to bring it closer to home for us is that there's a rapid behavior change that has happened, which has resulted in unprecedented levels of travel demand management, which is a transport engineer's dream, right? Because everybody's working from home, there's less travel, there's less traffic congestion, there's reduced noise and pollution. The whole way of working around offices has kind of changed. It's all on its head now. And maybe that's never going to change back to what it was before. We can only hope. There's been an accelerated capability in online things. You know, we're always talking about that it's better to take things to people than people to things. And I think that's probably going to change quite a lot going forward. There's a lot of stuff that's been happening with regards to social distancing around public transport, and I'll show some of that implications of that just now. But this is just to show in sort of a highlight of what this actually means in space. So the top there is Hospital Bend. Those of you from Cape Town or know Cape Town, is that if you're trying to get out of the CBD in the evening and you're going through Hospital Bend, you're not going to get there very quickly, unless, like me, you're wise enough to ride a motorcycle. Hospital Bend in the picture on the right-hand side is from our freeway management system during the lockdown. And we're asking ourselves the question now, what's the best way to use this space now that it's available? And those are some of the things that we're dealing with at the city, and some of the things that we're proposing in terms of interventions for travel demand management post-lockdown. We've also done a lot of work on trying to understand the implications on public transport with the social distancing restrictions that are applied to in-vehicle capacity. And we know that the taxis are operating at 70% capacity, buses are 50% capacity, so the average is about 60% in-vehicle capacity for public transport. And we've tried to assess that in terms of how can the public transport system now respond to the demand profile. Luckily, the demand profile is down because of the lockdown levels that we're in, but that's going to change. It has social distancing implications in terms of public transport facilities. Everybody's working from home. Is this the new normal? Can we make this the new normal? Can we try and enable this kind of arrangement to get travel demand management benefits out of it? This is just kind of setting the scene for some of the things that I want to say now, but I think this is the most important part that I wanted to mention, is about navigating this uncertainty. How do we do this, and what data is available to be able to do this? And we've spent quite a bit of time trying to understand this from a public transport perspective initially, because we're managing bus contracts and stuff like that. So we've looked at all of the sectors in the industry and how they are going to be opening during different levels of lockdown, and translated that into public transport trips, so we have an idea of what the public transport demand is likely to be at different levels of lockdown. But this can't be translated into background traffic for the purpose of TIAs. This is just an assessment to be able to try and understand the public transport demand profile. And we're using this now to try and understand how we can respond to this. So if you look at this, it's a normal peak hour or peak period. And if you look at the dotted lines, that represents the normal demand for transport. And this is particularly for public transport. The colored blocks at the bottom in the different colors represent the capacity that's available with the restrictions applied to in-vehicle capacity. And we know that we can't meet level 1 demand levels with the restrictions that are applied to public transport. The only way we can achieve that is if we can reduce the demand profile by flattening those curves in the demand. So a lot of the work that we're doing is around that. But that doesn't answer the questions about how you do TIAs around. So I think the whole issue is around uncertainty. And there's a lot of unanswered questions right now. And I think this is the most important slide that I wanted to highlight here. Is I've just tried to unpack it into things that we know, things that we don't know, and what the implications of these unknowns are. So we know that the overall traffic levels have been reduced, and they may be reduced for some time, even after COVID. Some of the interventions that we're trying to put in place are to enable the perpetuation of that reduction. But if the traffic is going to get to some sort of new normal, even though we don't know what that new normal looks like, how long is that going to take? And what does that new normal look like? But the implications of those knowns and unknowns is that there will be a rate of change over time, which we will need to try and collect data and understand as it is happening, because we can't predict it right now because we don't know what it looks like. Then in terms of land use and trip generation rates. So land development generates trips, right? This is known, this is not going to change. So the trip generation rates necessarily don't really change. But what is unknown is to what extent the associated services continue to be accessed by alternative means other than the traditional transport mechanisms. And this doesn't affect the trip generation, because if a development exists, it will generate trips. And the real question is actually whether or not that development is viable in the traditional sense. But that's not our question to answer as transport professionals. In terms of public transport, we know the vehicle occupancy is constrained due to social distancing. But the unknown is, well, will this result in a modal shift or a negative modal shift back towards private car usage? But even though that will be offset by a lower demand profile that exists due to the adaptation that's happened at various levels of lockdown. So the implications of that are that the background traffic might have a higher proportion of public transport trips than it did have pre-lockdown. But we don't know this yet. So we're trying to increase our efforts in the city to arrest this negative modal shift. The other thing that we do know is that in Cape Town anyway, is that, because we've done a lot of analysis and congestion analysis, is that 80% of all the private vehicle transport in Cape Town is single occupancy vehicles, which is a problem, obviously. And that's not likely to change that much, but it's also very income specific and has certain spatial attributes that are related to that. So it applies more in some places of the city than others. And we have an understanding of that nuance now based on a lot of information that we've collected over time. But the unknown is, how much will lockdown affect private transport user travel behavior now that the adaptation has already happened? Because the private transport users, the choice users, are predominantly in skilled fields where working from home and working remotely is more possible than it is in the captive public transport space. So how is this going to change, and how long will this take to change? And will collecting data on this now be meaningless? I think from the previous presentations, I think we understand that that probably is the case. So the implications of that is that there's no realistic way to calculate this now or in the short term. And as a worst case scenario, the old normal comes back. We can use that as the worst case scenario. So if we look at the old normal, which is not what we want, but we can use that as a basis for estimation right now. So recent traffic count data, I think, is the best way to go forward on that one. What's also important to consider is, in the mix of traffic, is the school-related traffic and how that relates to the lockdown levels and regulations, which are unfolding as we speak, but with varying degrees of indecision on the part of the Department of Education. Promoting public transport and sustainable mobility modes is even more important now than it was before, because if you want to change the demand profile over time, and it's a slow burn, then you need to do it by reshaping the urban space and form. But how long will this take? And how long will it take before public transport reaches full capacity? This is an unknown. So if transit-oriented development is development associated with transit systems, but the transit systems aren't operating because of social distancing requirements, how long will it take before the full uptake is realized? These are unknowns, we don't know. So that again could result in a modal split or a modal shift towards private transport as opposed to public transport. Then there's obviously a temporal dimension to this, because all of these changes are varying over time. And there's multiples of variables, and all of those variables will be changing at different speeds. So what is unknown right now is which things will change the most and which things will change the fastest. And this is where we're going to need to apply some innovation in thinking to this. And as a city, we're very open to innovative approaches to assessing this kind of thing in terms of using old data and projections into the future, and how these things could possibly, these different variables could trade off against each other. So we're open to that conversation, and we actually rely on the professional fraternity through bodies like Saice to pool data, to pool resources, and come up with innovative solutions to deal with this. And we're open to that conversation. Then there's an unprecedented opportunity now, and I need to make this point, and this is going to be my last slide after this, is that we have to aim for something better than we had before lockdown. But the big question is, and what's unknown is, what is the appetite for this, and what are we going to do about it? But what we do know is that it's going to take a concerted effort from both the public and private sector to pull it off. So my last slide is just to leave it with this message, is that, you know, when we're talking about the returning to normal, we've got to ask ourselves the question, what part of the old normal do we not want to return to? And how do we change that? High congestion levels, carbon emissions, long travel times, we all know about this. How do we mitigate against getting back to the old normal, which is not what we want to have? Because all of these have been significantly reduced during lockdown, but life carried on because adaptation happened. So we need to enable that adaptation to continue going forward. And hopefully I saved you some time there.
Thank you, Lee. That was a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much. And it is so relevant. It's very often transport systems don't change, habits don't change. It really takes a shock to the system, such as this lockdown has had, for us to forge new habits. And it would be a waste if we as transport engineers don't make the most of the change and try and not get back to the old normal. So thanks for that. I'd like us to get our panelists to all turn on their videos so that you can see each other and you can see, the audience can see you. Thank you, Alan, you first, very good. And while I quickly introduce them, so we have Alan Robinson from Sunroll, South African Road Agency. We also have Jose Montero, also from the Johannesburg Roads Agency. And we then, when I mean also like Esther, not like Alan. And we have, thanks Esther, then we have Robin Chetty, who looks after public transport at eThekwini Transport Authority, and Nuran Ordine from City of Cape Town, who looks after traffic impact studies. Thank you. Okay, so we've had lots of questions, and I was just wondering if any of the panelists, thinking of you, Jose, perhaps would want to make a comment about what Lee has said in terms of the new normal, and how do we capture the benefits of it? If you have a comment, you're on mute.
Sorry, there we go. Sorry, Madian. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think from the, you know, and I'm talking specifically from the City of Johannesburg side, I don't think we're as far advanced as what Lee down in Cape Town are. And I think, you know, we're still sitting at a situation where we're rolling out the BRT, obviously. They've got quite an extensive public transport network down in the Cape. So I think our immediate problem, and I mean, this is, I think, while we're sitting here today, is you know, how do we go, although we know we have to change, how do we go about this change in the interim until, if there is going to be any normal? I mean, none of us, if we could all look into this crystal ball and see what's going to happen next year, it would be very simple. But right now we're all sitting with all these unknowns, and it's, the question still remains: how do we move forward? What do we do so that in the interim we're sitting, and I mean, I know for myself and with Esther as well, we're sitting with huge number of applications coming through. I think there's a massive appetite where people have been sitting under lockdown, nothing has moved, and all of a sudden we got this influx, and all of a sudden we sit with these problems, right? You guys are the engineers, how do we resolve this? And I think this is what, which is, you know, most valuable about us sitting around here today, trying to come up with some sort of solutions, how, you know, we can move forward. The issue, and this is where we've all touched, we've got data, and I think most municipalities, most metros and that type of thing have got data that one could always rely and go back onto. The problem comes in, and I mean, if I just look at Johannesburg, and I'm looking more around the residential appetite that Johannesburg has got, is how do we handle the submission of a traffic impact study within a residential area, for argument's sake, like Bryanston, along these class 5 roads and along the class 4 roads where we don't have historical data? How do we move there? What do we do there? And I think those are the questions that, well, myself hoping to move away from here, that maybe we can have some sort of answers.
Thanks for that, Jose. I'm going to quickly throw in an on-off-the-side question that came through right now on the panel, from the speakers, and that's to Jose and Esther. How are we going to meet with you? Do you want to be met in person, or can online meetings work for you?
Well, let me start answering by
this. We know your diaries.
Let me put it to this way. This is the first time I'm doing a Zoom meeting. I'm highly chuffed with this situation. I think this is the way to go. I mean, why have a one-on-one meeting where, I mean, you could have the same type of meeting, you've got the presentation that came up. I mean, why spend the time coming to my office or to Esther's office where we could do it exactly from your own place?
Thanks. I think that's great. Lee, you want to comment?
No, I'm just surprised that it's your first Zoom meeting. I have about 27 Zoom meetings a day. But yeah, I think I've just been looking at some of the comments that have been coming up, and I think and I tried to resist the urge to answer them while I was giving my presentation. But I think some of the ones that are coming up is it seems like that maybe there's a perception that the city has this golden pot of data for everything. And it's not necessarily the case. You know, we don't have a database of all the traffic counts that were ever done at every TIA for every development application since you know, Noah fell off the ark. We don't have that. What we do is we collect data on screen lines and things like that, and public transport data. So we don't, you know, people are looking at us to give them specific data. So if you want to do a count at a particular intersection, but now it's going to be meaningless, but there's no historic data for a count at that particular intersection, how do you do that? And I think that's where we're expecting some sort of innovation required around how to come up with something that could be considered both meaningful and specific to a particular location, because we don't have that very localized data available.
Thanks.
I don't know if Naran might want to add to that.
Yeah, yes, please. Thanks, Lee. I think your presentation was great in terms of the next 2 years, particularly to try and capture the gains that we've had in the last, 3 months? I don't know how long I've been stuck in the South, so about 3 months. But the question on how the city of Cape Town will be assessing TIA is a little bit more focused and very similar to Esther's opinion. At the moment, the policy that I've put in place is you can use historic data for about 3 years back, but if it's further than that, we're happy to consider it. We're not going to put something sort of hard and fast and say, well, if you got data for 6 years, we're just going to throw it out. It might mean that you have to get some sort of additional data to try and triangulate the accuracy of the data. That might be something that can be looked at. The COVID period I know it's very stressful for all of us, and we think, oh, how long is this going to go on for? We need to understand that the TIAs, particularly from the City of Cape Town, I don't know how it works with JRA, but it's as part of a bigger development application. So we don't necessarily get a second bite at the cherry. So if we get an application and it goes through its processes and there are conditions set, at some point those are the conditions that are set. There's no going back to redo the TIA and put additional conditions on board. One also needs to think about the fairness of an application that was approved. Let's say, what are we in now, June 2020? Let's say there was an application that was approved in June 2019. So that's normal traffic congestion. There's a whole list of conditions set on that particular developer. And if we were to put, let's say, have some sort of lesser congestion, if we count it now, that would be unfair to that developer. So in agreement that we won't be able to use data collected right now. So definitely historical data. And any sort of innovative idea, please come to us. We're happy to sit down and have a discussion, see where we can go forward. But in terms of if there is no data available, that's a difficult question. That's a very difficult question. We can always calculate the DCs. That's simple. Calculate your DCs. You pay the money to the city. It's the internal smaller upgrades that the city depends on the background traffic that we can't get now. That's really the part where we will be missing out on. So if it's a class 5 and there's no data, very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. We also need to think of the other side of it. It's not just traffic. Let's say you want to calculate your DCs for stormwater and sewage use. Right now, in a flat, in a residential, if you took the average right now, it would be much higher than it would be at a normal rate. So if they counted sewage usage in a residential apartment right now, they'd be paying a much higher rate. So we also need to think that there's both ways, and we don't want to be unfair to developers on both in both respects.
Thanks, Nuran. That's useful. And the reality is, this is possibly a transition to a new normal. We're already in a bit of a new normal. It's a transition towards a new normal. So I think that requires a lot of flexibility and a lot of collaboration, which is very encouraging to hear the offers of the city so far to just really work with the professionals. So thanks for that. I want to quickly ask Avi Menon. He's from Coleco Consultants, and he started an initiative of just collating traffic data. Avi, do you want to quickly, very briefly, just share what you've done and how that could be useful for some of our members? And please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Madeline. Hi, everybody. My name is Avi Menon. I'm from Coleco, and I'm also on the Saice transportation division with Madeline. So we all collect data, whether we are consultants or municipality or parastatal, we all collect data, and that data sits in our laptops, hard disks, or company server, and we never actually share this data. And every time we have to do a traffic study or any sort of planning study, we have to go and we just collect data. And it could be that, for example, Madeline collected that information a week ago or a month ago, and I don't know about it. So this poses two problems. One is that we're wasting clients' money. The second thing is that there's a bit of a time delay in terms of setting up the traffic counts. And if it's a not normal day in terms of school holidays or there's a bit of a delay in terms of collecting this information. So as Coleco, we've always had the vision that data should be shared and it should be easily accessible and it should be at one point. And as a part of that, what we did was we developed a platform where data can be shared. And it's always been something that we wanted to do, but as most consultants here know, as soon as you get paid work, this dream gets thrown at the back and you never spend time on it. And when COVID hit, we realized the importance of this platform. And we said, we can't stop development. This is really hurting our industry and we need to get this platform up and running. So what we have done is we've put historic traffic counts that we have had over the last 5 years. and we have more than 20,000 data points, and we have shared it. You can, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, you can write it down. It's maps.coleco.co.za. So you go there, you see what intersections you're looking for. If it's there, you can order it. We're still busy uploading some of the data. So if you don't see your intersection, please give us a call, and we'll share that. We'll look through our archive and see if we have the data and share it with you. So that's where we stand right now, and what we want to do is include other data which goes beyond just turning movement or traffic counts, and that is basically land use data, public transport, importantly latent rights, and even probe data if we can. And the idea is to have it like a planning tool that before you go out and do any traffic study or master plan, you can go there and you can get all the information that you need. And yeah, so that's the idea behind it. And so I've told you the link, you can go there and take a look at it. And if you we rely on people to share data, so if you have data, please give us a call, and we would love to include your data. And otherwise, if you have any suggestions on how we can improve or what can be done with this platform, yeah, give us a shout.
Thanks, Avi. It's a great initiative, and the idea, once again, as I understood from you, is it's not, you know, it's for us all to collaborate on, and it would be useful the more people who can sort of dip into this and buy into it and share more, and in the end have a much more comprehensive database, yeah, and help us in future uncertainties. Alan, do you want to say something about all SANRAL's efforts in just having data? And please unmute yourself.
Hi, thanks everybody. Yeah, I just want to add a few comments. From SANRAL's point of view, we had to sort of take a stab at what would happen through COVID, and this is right at the beginning. And literally just, we decided that around 30% would be in level 5, about 40% in level 4, 70% level 3, 90% at level 2, and we're back to normal after that. And so far, the actual figures are 28% 5, 54%. So we were a bit low in the estimates in level 4. We're currently at 70%, which is spot on for level 3. And then we said 90%, but I'm revising that to a lower base. So in our forecast, by October, you've got your new base. Yeah, we actually we don't know what's going on, but it comes back to the same thing that we all know that a forecast is wrong. It's just some are useful. And using what Esther was saying, as long as you use sound engineering judgment based on the data that is available, and you can come up with a defendable case, make your case. That is, we don't have silver balls. We don't know the answers. We don't have all the information. In fact, as an authority, what we generally do and developers do is they appoint clever people called consultants to come up with ideas and approaches. I'm just throwing it out there. And as long as it makes sense and it's defendable, that's what we've got to go with at the moment. So, as I say, that's basically my prediction. I think by October, we could pretty much say this is going to be the new base. It's making the assumption that we're not going to go straight back to level 5 at some point, because everything is pear-shaped. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
thanks for that. Yeah, I guess that's what we're sort of trying to get to. Will we actually have a new baseline? Will we guess the new baseline, and will we be able to then, within that, also try and make assumptions and make plans that would make sure we don't completely return to the old normal? I know that I've heard in, sorry, Alan?
Again, forecasts are level of accuracy in the forecast. If you want a much more accurate base, then we talk this time next year, which is no good to anybody. So I'll go with October.
Mm. Okay, I wanted to, Robin, your video is not on, but I was going to ask you, while we're on this topic of, I'd say, travel demand management in action. We've learned and spoken about travel demand management, but we've never really been able to successfully, in my opinion, implement it anywhere other than improving our public transport systems. I think there's been a lack of really properly implementing TDM. And now we're seeing it. Everybody's seeing the benefit of it. Are you, Robin, you mentioned to me that you are in eThekwini also talking to bigger employers to see if we can try and generate a much more sustainable transport situation for future.
Well, hi, thanks, Madeline. I don't think that we've been talking, but I think that we're just seeing some of the possible long-term impacts that's coming out of this whole crisis. I just jotted a couple of things here. I think that the first thing that I'm seeing is that there's an increase in, there's going to be an increase in non-shared modes of travel, such as maybe bicycles, scooters, motorbikes, possibly walking, and I think a real decrease in the shared modes, such as public transport and ride sharing. Just before I came onto this platform today, and as the city of Durban, we probably about 3 months ago, beginning of this year, we had like about 3,000 e-hailing vehicles in Durban. And we just heard now there's over like 8,000, and there's been quite a shift where people are beginning to use Uber and other means of meter taxis and stuff. So you can see that people are quite nervous to use public transport, and therefore there's a shift. And I think that's something that we need to start thinking about going forward, because then I think there's a net decrease in home to work trips. We can see that there's a lot of people that are adopting to work from home, especially people can log on, and you can see even on our panel, some of you are still working from home. And you can see that's a major issue. I think in Durban, you know, we're also a tourist city, and we can see there's a massive reduction in tourism as well. And then I think there's a reduction in travel due to probably the unemployment that we're probably going to face, as well as the economic slow downtown. And then I think if you look at the TDM measures already being adopted, is that there's lots of online meetings. We are in our offices here in the municipality, but we don't actually physically meet in conference rooms. We actually, in our offices, are connected with teams. So even within our floor here, we actually connect with my team in my staff, plus outside, we have teams meetings. So you can see that there's no travel between buildings and within the city. We do have staggered working hours already. As I said, lots of working from home. We're not traveling in the peaks anymore. Lots of people are traveling off peak. But also something that I think that we need to think about going forward. And I think from everyone that's talking, I know that as we're going through this crisis, that there's going to be disastrous gridlocks if people turn to cars because they remain concerned about getting the virus on public transport. So obviously, you know, public transport usage, commuters will drop, but there'll be an increase in vehicular travel. And how do we actually deal with that? So I think there is a dilemma. The dilemma is with public transport and the shared virus, and then private vehicle and congestion going forward. And then I think that's, I think that's more or less what I wanted to say about what I believe possible long-term impacts. I think also from our side, it probably will also, because of maybe lesser of public transport usage, there'll be probably increase in subsidy costs. Maybe, I'm not sure, no one's spoken about what the impact will be on the fuel levy and those kinds of things.
Can I add something to that?
Sure, thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, just maybe to let people know some of the things that we're doing in Cape Town that may be useful is the reason why I was late for logging onto this meeting is because I was doing a presentation at the City Manager's Executive Management Team on some strategic, immediate TDM interventions that we can do in the city. And there's a range of them, and it relates to enabling flexible and remote working for the 27,000 employees of the city, and making sure that we have the right systems and protocols in place to enable that. We're doing it now because we have to. But we want to make sure that we have all the right systems and mechanisms in place to do that, which includes IS&T infrastructure and everything else. But then we're identifying a lot of interventions that we want to do to the network. And some of it could be, we haven't finalized the list yet, but some of it could be in the form of some rather radical tactical urbanism, to the point where we're thinking of reallocating road space to non-motorized transport. And it was supported by the executive management team. It's also supported by the political leadership. So we're charging ahead with that now, because the window of opportunity is now, because we're never in our professional careers going to get the opportunity to do something radical. So that's what we're pushing in the city. And we're looking at network interventions, infrastructure interventions, operational efficiency interventions at PTIs and all of those kind of things, as well as institutional mechanisms within the city, as well as engaging big business through the Cape Chamber to try and see how we can assist them and enable them to continue to work remotely and flexibly. So we're pushing hard to try and maximize the opportunity that we have now. And I'm happy to discuss those kind of things with anybody else that's interested.
Thanks for that, Lee. I was going to ask, I think Johannesburg Roads Agency, if you are also, reconsidering in a way the role of a TIA and making sure that we take a holistic approach when we look at TIAs, and not just looking at the impact of in a way the car traffic, but also look at how would we do a traffic impact study and the recommendations around it that would actually go towards a more sustainable transport system that would feed into a more let's say in a more sustainable approach, and put more emphasis on public transport use, and use the TIA, or let's call it in a transport assessment, more as a tool to achieve those outcomes. Jose or Esther? Jose, you look keen. Do you want to unmute?
Look, I think what we found the most successful transit-oriented developments are those that you match your OD patterns to current services available as well as future anticipated services available. Where TOD developments comes as a result of a basket of rights. And when those basket of rights is developed in a sustainable manner, in a sense of the balance between when what right gets developed in relation to when what public transport or cycling, walking extra becomes a feasible option, then, in my opinion, you start realizing the TOD principles. It is unfortunately when that basket of rights is influenced a lot by economic indicators, where there's a demand for residential at one stage and there's no demand for commercial warehousing at the same stage, or the area in which the basket of rights is being developed is skewed towards one specific land use type. So it's all about balancing the land use, in my opinion, in order to get the principles of TOD realized. Then you can definitely, the conventional TI of focusing on the traffic, rather start focusing on the person and where the person it will be working, living, walking, going to school, etc. But if we don't get that balance right in terms of how the land use rights in a basket gets developed and phased in, taking into account that we obviously financially as a city will always run a couple of steps behind in the rollout of our public transport services, the development, long-term feasibility of ever becoming a TOD starts becoming unfeasible. And you start seeing that development start being rezoned, and the basket in the long term, over 5 or 10 years, no longer really meets the objectives of a transport or oriented development where people can live, walk, cycle, and use public transport in a feasible manner.
I've just had another question that's slightly different. It's back to the database, and that is, I think, in a way, making sure that Avi, I think a question to you is the database, is it an open platform? Is it freely available to everybody? Who owns the data in a way?
So yeah,
sorry to go back to this point.
So the data, so we rely on collaborators to give us data. So for example, if you have data, you're welcome to share it with us. Is it free or not? Some of the data is free. If it's data that's already been paid for by taxpayers' money, then obviously, you know, we would have would like to share it for free. But then, if the collaborators charges a fee, then obviously we'll transfer it to the client. So, but the idea is that if an intersection, if for example, if you're counting a new intersection and it costs, let's say, 4,000 Rand, the idea is not to charge 4,000 Rand. You know, there might be an admin fee to put the data in the correct format, that it's consistent, and there may be a 500 or 1,000 Rand fee. So it depends on the intersection, depends on the source of the data and the type of data.
Thanks for that, Avi. Yeah, there was another question around data, and that is the Google or TomTom real-time data. Esther, in your slide, you showed some of the statistics of how it's changed during lockdown, and I know Alan has also got a lot of information. Is there a way one can use that to adjust information, or even be it historic data, or if you count now, is there an opportunity to do that?
Is that a question to me or to the
No, I think it's more to Esther. Yeah, Esther, you think you got a better handle on this Google and TomTom real-time data? In your opinion, is it useful? Is it something we can access and then use some of the factors?
Yes, so firstly, the data that we're currently using is public data, so anybody can access it off their website. Yeah, there is obviously ways that you can engage with TomTom and, you know, at a cost, get data sets available from them. We don't currently have any contract with TomTom, so we're not in a position to get any data sets from them or do analysis and run queries off their data. So what we as a city, and it's just one of our sources that we use, but what we use the data is, you know, to see a moment in time where we stand in comparison to last year, you know, and as Durban has also shown, you know, in terms of how has the peaks changed, you know, has there been substantial shifts in people travel behavior? Are they leaving earlier? Are they leaving later? Has the lockdown, you know, for those that are still going to work, can we see shifts in terms of how they're utilizing the time of day, the day of the week? Is there specific weeks that are becoming more desirable to work than others? So that's how we use the data. We don't have actual access to any raw data from the TomTom website. I do think that we must also really have a thought about the impact of educational trips on people's work behavior right now. It's obviously the current work from home strategy, even those people that are able to return to work under level 4, that has been easier or sometimes forcibly for them to stay at home as a result of the educational situation at this point in time. So it would be interesting to start seeing what would be the impact once the educational sector opens up, and how attached is the home to work trips to the home to educational trips, and how much influence does the educational trips have on people's ability to maintain the home work from home scenario that we see right now, which is obviously something that we want to retain a portion of that. And we would, in order to do that, we need to see what influences that work from home scenario that enables people to long term continue doing it right now. So we're very keen to see what the network is going to do once the schools start opening. Yes, it will be a phased approach to the opening, but we're hoping to get some interesting data to see how much educational trips influences a person's ability to continue to working from home.
Okay, thanks. Nuran?
Hi, thanks, guys. I think we need to put some of this data, historic data availability in context. For one, my suggestion would be there's a significant amount of the kind of data you need for TIA is very different to the kind of data you use to estimate public transport needs, growth rates, whether you need to upgrade the N1, N7, sorry, I'm just talking about Cape Town. Those are different kinds of data. There's a significant amount of data sitting with each one of these consultants that are on. I mean, there's about 300 and odd participants and probably, 1,000 more. So I would suggest particularly from Cape Town, if all the consultants would get together, either Saice can do some sort of coordination. I'm not sure if that's something you guys can do. And the reason I'm saying this is because the city doesn't own the traffic counts that go into TIAs. That's owned by each and every single developer that has paid for that data. So for instance, areas that are highly developed, that have been developing over the last 10 years, for instance, the observatory is a significant amount of data. So you should be able to collect data for anything that's probably in that area. Where you're going to have trouble is not the big developments. The big developments, you're going to look at regional data, you can look at the ENMI models, things like that. So I don't think the big developments are going to have issues. We can deal with them in a particular way. It's the medium type developments that are happening in an area that has not developed a lot in the last 5 years. That's where you're going to have issues. And that's not necessarily such a big portion of development applications that are coming through. But my suggestion would be the consultants to get together to have a discussion on how they can make the current database that each and every one of them have in their servers at the moment, to make it available for all the other consultants, and then we can work from there.
Thanks for that, Naran. It's sort of, for me, it feels like it's about time to wrap up, and I think it raised a very valid point that ultimately this is about, it's unknown. There's no crystal ball. Nobody really knows what the future holds. In other words, we have to put our heads together. We have to continue thinking this through, continue collaborating and work together and adopt the flexibility. And as I said earlier, I'm very encouraged by the comments that Jose and Esther and Lee and Naran and Rivash made about applying sound engineering judgment and being able to adopt that, and not just throw the rules at us, because that's, or when I'm saying us, I don't mean us traffic engineers, or maybe I do, but but effectively really sit and being collaborative, and also not just around how we approach TIAs, but also how we approach data. So from that perspective, I think today has been incredibly useful and insightful, and feels to me that we've really opened the channels, we've opened we've opened this debate series platform, and I'd like us to continue the platform. So I've asked Debbie to also put together a poll that people can just respond to say, how often should we have these platforms? And if you also maybe want to answer, put in the chat session some of the topics you think we'd like to cover. And there has been suggestions such as the role and promotion of active travel and any form of travel demand management, to make sure that we collaborate on that and we actually get the most of that out, because we don't want to return to the old situation that Lee sketched so very well for us. And then so effectively making sure we don't return to the old, and also I think there was a mention of other challenges we face, such as the e-hailing, etc. So if you have any comments and any questions you want us to debate, and please put it in there. If you have suggestions of who would be ideal on being such a panel, please let us know. And Debbie, will you put up the poll so that we can just have a bit of an idea of how frequently people would like to see each other's faces? Because I think what we had in mind is that maybe we could do this maybe twice a month, maybe monthly, maybe alternative months. And and maybe if there's a real burning topic, we can have a session in between. But I think more than twice a month would be a bit challenging for us. So please just vote, and when we'll get a sense, and we'll get back to you about what the outcome of that was. We also will share all the presentations, and apologies that I haven't said that right in the beginning. So that's a question that kept coming through. But we will share the presentations. We have also recorded the session, and we will be able to, Debbie will be able to share that for us on some form of platform that I'm not exactly sure what it is. But overall, there's Debbie's just, yeah, no, okay, so you're all gonna vote. I think originally I said I would love to do this twice a month, but now that I've done it, I think once monthly is gonna be enough. But I'd like to just from my side say thank you to everybody who's been so supportive in getting this going. We literally decided this is such a burning issue, and let's strike while the iron is hot. Let us get people together around a round table and do this. And we put this together in literally in 2 weeks. So thanks for everybody. I don't know if there's anybody who just wants to add a final note before I hand back to Frederick to do a vote of thanks. Please please can you do? Jose, thanks. Unmute.
So, Madeleine, sorry, just to go back, and I think it's something that Nuran also made mention around the how do we go about, you know, phasing in part of a traffic impact study at a later stage that we get a second stab at it. And this is something that Esther and myself have had discussions around this, that we want to engage the planning department, you know, when an application comes in, so that we don't stall the application process going forward, is to put some sort of condition as part of that application, that one could say that, you know, prior to, call it the approval of the SDP, and I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not a town planner, if that is possible or not, prior to the approval of the SDP being approved, that we, you know, an addendum to the original traffic study could be done. And it doesn't cut you out of the situation that it isn't a condition of that application. It would be that, you know, you've left it in essence open-ended. And I'm not saying this goes on, you know, continuously. It's over this period to maybe try and cross that hurdle. That's something that we're going to engage our planning department to see if it is possible that we could have some stab at the traffic impact study. And exactly what Nuran said, the bigger developments are not going to be the problem. Our problem is going to be the 60, 70, 80 unit type developments. Those are going to be where our issues are, where they're sitting smack bang in the middle of a residential area. How do we deal with those? And I think, that, you know, going forward, and is exactly what you said, talk to us. We'll be open, because we know, you know, at the end of the day, we don't want to stall development. It's a question of, let's see how we can work, you know, going forward, because this is all new to us as well.
And how are we going to get hold of you, Jose?
Me? Well, we hopefully going
guys.
back to the offices next week.
Okay, there was a specific question as to what would be then the best way of contact you guys. It's just the normal email and phone calls would be suffice.
Yeah, no, correct. Look, I know that there was a question as well. Would we be open to having these, you know, Zoom sessions and that? Definitely, that's something that I think is definitely beneficial. And I think exactly that. If the normal or the new norm is going to be working from home, I think this is going to be the way to go.
Yeah, we can have a major impact on the congestion in Johannesburg if we don't have meetings with Jose anymore.
Yeah.
Lee, do you want a final comment? It looks like you want to say something.
I wasn't going to, but I just wanted to congratulate Saice for putting this together and taking the first plunge into the world of digital meetings, because this is exactly the thing that results in a better new normal, right? So well done. I think it was a very useful discussion, and I wish I had more time to read all of the questions and comments that had come up, and it would be useful if you could capture those possibly.
Yes, Debbie's going to do that.
Good.
I think I should really hand over to Frederick and give him 2 minutes to close the session for us. He was viciously making notes, he told me. Thank you, everybody. Thanks from me and goodbye.
Yeah, just a last few comments related to the technical discussions. And this is, I've heard it all over and over in all the discussions. And we need to encourage ourselves to, in this time of a new normal, to really apply our minds in terms of what we are reporting, when we report, and how we report. It's really an ideal opportunity to rethink our general approach. Then secondly, I'm trying to put out the challenge to at least the 3 metros, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't participate in that. And that is to prepare some research papers on the trends and what happened over this period and how it appears to be, let's say, March next year. You may consider presenting a paper next year at SATC, and then we may have even a joint session at SATC in terms of other lessons that we've learned, because this opportunity will only come now. And as I've seen, the previous similar case was in 1920. So it's 100 years ago. So we need to document what is happening here properly for the benefit of the future. Really, the last thing about you and your staff, encourage your staff in this difficult time, support them. If there's really an opportunity to get closer in your companies to your people, this is the time. And I really invite you to think a bit about the new norm that is going to be normal for all of us. Thank you. Then last thing about the division, we are going to do this more. We're going to use this survey and some of the input and the questions that we're going to prepare and see whether we not present that in some form. There were a number of questions. I just want to make a general statement about what about rural areas outside of the metros. Please pick up the phone, arrange a meeting, Zoom, and if you really battle to find the individuals, maybe we can assist and facilitate a meeting or things like that. We really need to take hands in this difficult time. And that's really what we as a division is trying to achieve. We've done a number of things already. This is our second reach out. We are gonna, in the next month, you're gonna get also a survey from our side, really reaching out, making sure that we stay in contact, making sure that you are aware that we are in the same boat and we are actually need to move this boat forward in a collective way. Just a last point in from my side, to all the organizers, Debbie and Refilwe, in terms of the administration and all of that. Our main panelists, really your time. I know it's taxpayers' money, but really you have difficult days because you are in the forefront there to say, what are we doing in this new norm? And thank you for your time, really, and the time of preparing the presentation. It's not just arriving and quickly have a bit of a discussion. We really, really have a great appreciation for your time. Even the other panelists, Alan, Jose, Nuran, Avi, for your time, Robin, thank you very much to everyone. Madeleine, to you, making all the phone calls. Please do this, please. Nagging people, sending things out. Thank you very much. And lastly, to the, I've checked the participants. We went up to 372 participating. Well, I don't think there's at the SATC's 372 at any session in the afternoon. So we are doing far better than SATC at any previous conferences. So we are going to continue with this as a transport division. Yes, it takes effort, but we are reaching out and we are in this industry because this is our passion in our lives. So thank you, Madeleine, for starting this up. And we're, as a division, going to stay close to all of its members. Thank you very much to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick, and thank you, everybody. I think I'm going to ask Debbie just to keep the meeting open for another 5 minutes so that people can type in topics that they'd like to get for our next questions. But with that, I'd love to just say, how do you say goodbye nowadays? Goodbye, everybody, and thank you so much for your contribution. Thanks for all 300 odd people who have registered online. I think we just feel very chuffed as Saice that we've had such a fantastic interest and turnout. So goodbye and cheers, good night, and stay safe.